Hello and welcome back, this is ProTailDev back with another Corrupting Spring Remaster video. This time what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating our models for our cave system, and we're going to be able to bring them into Unity and start creating our cave level. So let's get straight into it. Okay, so to start off with, we're back in Blender, and what we're going to be doing is just creating a simple mesh, a simple plane, and we're going to use that to kind of create our cave sections. So we're just subdividing it, and then we're going to do a random selection, so throughout a specific area, so doing that by just scrolling, and then choosing a random vertices that will be edited and moved along with the vertices that we've selected. I've also done a bit of smoothing to kind of shape the flat plane at the bottom, just to kind of add a little bit of difference to how it's shaped. So there you go, you can change the selection to how you what you can bring up for the random things, and this gives a kind of a rocky terrain, which is kind of what we want. Again, we want to build these sides up to make it more like a cave, and then what we do is we turn these into triangles instead of squares. The reason is because it looks a little bit better. Here I am, I skipped a little bit ahead here where I've done the sides, and then I kind of make another section here where I kind of add it together to see what it might look like if we had two sections to overlap him. And it looks quite nice. I think it looks good. And what I'm going to actually do then is rotate it, so I'm just going to duplicate it and then rotate it and move it up, and then kind of, as you can see, create a small cave section. And this is kind of what we're going to be doing all the way through, is basically rotating it or creating a new top section for the lower section to kind of add together. I'm doing a little bit of smoothing and editing with the sphere and the smooth, just to kind of blend it together, the bottom part, smooth it out a little bit and make it a little bit more interesting and unique for the floor, so that when the player goes over it, they can't really notice any repetition. Also make sure to rename them and then make them into a new group, which is collection, and then make sure they're all underneath that. Make sure they're all positioned correctly at 0, and then what I do is, this is another one that I'm going to show, because that was the cave done for the straight section, lined, and this is going to be a curve. So again, selection of random vertices, and then depending on the size of the selection, it will determine how much of an area around the vertices, which ones is clicked, and then we can raise them. So make sure they're all set to 0 as well, the flat plane, because we want to make sure that when we bring it into Unity later it's much better. So there you go, changing selection distance and trying to get what I want for like a curved section. I also make sure that by clicking the mouse circle in, so that I can select only one specific section, like a vertices axis, so a vertical axis. And then as I can see, again, I'm just smoothing it off, making spherical smoothing and stuff, and just for the specific parts we're walking. Then do the same thing, duplicate it and move it around a little bit, like rotate it to try and add it up better with this section. And again, we can play around with how they're specifically placed later on in Unity. So there you go, I've added the straight and the curve just to see what it looks like. I think it looks fine as it is. Again, we're not putting too much work into it because we don't have that much time. However, for the most part I'm good with that. Another thing I did for some of the levels and some of the sections is I smoothed off, and I used the sculpting tool to smooth off certain sections and kind of add a little bit of randomness as well, and make things look natural. So here I'm making a little bit of a slope. This is one of the open cavern sections that I did, and I wanted a slope leading up from a top section where I can kind of customize the level a little bit more, adding different heights. Another thing I did was I need to create these kind of pillars, rock pillars, that will be touching the ceiling and the floor, kind of connecting it and holding the cave up. So here I am. This is a specific platform that a player might be able to jump on. And then what I do once I've got this, I make it into a triangle because it'll look better when I smooth it out. And then I go into the sculpting tool and then sculpt it a little bit into different ways. So smoothing it, adding to it, adding cracks to it. And as you can see, I get a little bit more of an interesting look to these pillars, a much more natural look. So after some fine tuning and changing, this is what I end up with. I think it looks pretty good. Okay, so after finishing all of that, all of our different models, now I'm going to show them very briefly. This is our straight flat, basically our tunnel that we're going to have for our cave. It's very low poly, which is the whole point, and it's very spiky, which is kind of the theme I was going for these rock formations. This is like a little curve. Then we have here, which is a little bit bigger. It's more of an open cavern. This is the second open cavern. It's a little bit different. It's got more of a flat center. It's got like a hill to go up to and a bit of an incline here. Next we have a mount that's very smooth, so that I can kind of implement that into the terrain and kind of change the way it looks. Then we have a spiked mount, which is going to be specifically for decoration, maybe to again add it into the levels to make some of the caves a bit different. Next we have another open cavern, a little bit different, but as you can see, it definitely looks like a mount. On this side we have it completely open, possibly to multiple tunnels. Then we have another open section, very similar theme, much more smoother floor, so maybe for a bigger battle, much more smoother ceiling. Next we have a flat plane. This is just a standard flat plane for me to be able to edit, maybe create some paths and some flat areas that maybe I can create my own cave systems and certain sections that maybe the player can walk on. Now we have another open cavern, which is a little bit different. It's completely open. Again, we can use those custom spiked mounts like this one here, and then implement that into different sides if we want to create our own cave. Next we have a platform. So this is something a player may be able to jump onto. We can use this in different ways. Then we have a small version of it, lower poly obviously because it's much smaller. And then I was going to implement a spiked wall, but then just ran out of time. So that's what we got for now for our different objects. I'm going to bring them into Unity, and then what we'll do is we'll start creating a level. But before that, I need to show something. Okay, so we are back in Unity, and you'll notice immediately a very, very different feel to the map. So this scene itself is dramatically different in terms of the lighting and the feel of it. It should feel very, very atmospheric and different. This is because if you notice at the very top, we're now in Unity 2020.1.4, so we're on the latest version of Unity, and I've decided to implement the high definition render pipeline. This was the big reason I was been testing it for the last couple of weeks, is so that I can bring this into this new lighting system. The reason is because I wanted to be able to play around with things like water shaders, and it's only really available on Unity high definition render pipeline. You can only do certain things, like certain visual effects can only be done with the high definition render pipeline. And so I really wanted to bring this into it, and I managed to get a very interesting result. This is what I've got so far. I'm going to play it just so I can show you it and give you a good feel. So this is what I've got so far. I've had to change a lot of the lighting, a lot of settings behind the scenes to try and make this work. Obviously materials break, the lighting breaks, everything has to be refixed. Compared to how I had to fix it before, it has to all be redone. So basically after I did all that and I refixed the materials, because even the materials are completely different, they're handled differently for the high definition render pipeline, so I had to completely redo them, all the materials. Some of them not quite fixed yet, but that's okay because I'm only showing this as an example. This isn't, as you can see here, this isn't the skybox I plan on using. I plan on making my own custom one, but that takes a little bit of time. So at the moment the old textures, the old skybox doesn't work for the high definition render pipeline. You do have to create your own, which is okay. I can do that, just might take a little bit. So you'll notice it's a bit more foggy, which is another thing I wanted, volumetric fog, so that I can add like rays into the like sun rays and things to the map, which will add a little bit more interest and a little bit more depth. Again, I want to change the water to make it more realistic, because at the moment this is the best I could do, which at the moment it isn't moving because the material is broken. Again, that needs to be fixed, but I plan on just completely changing it and adding a new shader, like water shader to it, with using the shader graph, which you can use with the high definition render pipeline. So some of the lighting changes, which I'm very proud of, is things like this. So this is the spirit energy which you can pick up. As you can see, it glows, it looks really interesting, and this is some of the examples of what I've done. Some of the lighting again just needs to be tested and played around with. So one of this is the energy. So if I just shoot this, you'll have a little bit of a glow, which I kind of like. And I plan on changing a bunch of stuff with the lighting. It's all about experimenting to get your own feel. And this is only just the start for the lighting. I plan on doing a whole lot of different things, especially with effects. I want to create like really interesting visual effects, which you can do with this version of the high definition render pipeline. That'll about do it. So now we're on the newest version of Unity with the high definition render pipeline working. So let's move on now to creating a cave level. Okay, so now what we're going to do is the cave, and we're going to create an empty game object just so we can kind of put our meshes that we've imported into there, into these empty game objects to create a prefab later. So what we're doing here is just sorting out the meshes and kind of brought this in to see the sizes, the scale of it, to make sure it's correct. And I'll do the same for all of them, and then there I am, empty game objects with the mesh inside, and make sure it's renamed, and then I'll turn all these into a prefab so that I can use them throughout the level for creating. So there you go, there I am creating the prefabs, and then once I've done that, I can get rid of them. I make sure that some of them needed a bit of rotation, so that's what I'm doing here, is just rotating some of them, and I add a mesh collider onto them all so that we can actually walk on it as a player. So I make sure that these all have them. Next, I start bringing them into the world and then start laying them together to try and combine them. Here I am as a player just running around, testing it, make sure I can walk on it, and then throughout this video I'll kind of skip through it, but basically I'll slowly create the world as we go. There'll be a separate video where I might just do one whole level together, kind of uncut but sped up, and basically use it as a time lapse. But here I am. This is what I'll do, is I'll take some of these spiked mounds, these flattened mounds, and different kind of parts that we created to kind of create the level and make it more organic and unique. So this is a straight section, and I'm just kind of making sure that I'm rotating it slightly and adding it together. There'll be lots of different skipping in this, obviously because this took quite a long time. There was a lot of changes I made throughout the level design. Level design usually takes a long time anyway, so I'm just trying to stick these together. One of the problems I did realize while I was doing this is when you have to connect them at the very edges, it's kind of a bit difficult because they kind of cut off immediately. What I should have done was have them slope down a little bit, that way they can overlap on certain sections. But I do my best to kind of compensate for that by trying to make sure that the player doesn't notice it later. But here I am just adding little sections into walls and stuff to make sure that certain parts are hidden so the player can't get out the map. And then of course test it out. You can see these little sections where I have to avoid where they overlap and you can't get over. I fix that later. Next I make another empty game object, and that's going to have all the cave sections in it. I will also create a specific cave section 1 where this section is going to be in it, and then I'll create another one later. I'll go over that in a second. But what I'm then do is I need some spotlights. So, but to do that and to really add to that, we need a new kind of lighting system. Now I do have a directional light here, so an empty game object that's going to handle the main level's light. But because it's cave light, I do get rid of the directional and then just add a global volume, which is, I just call it the nighttime lighting, which adds fog and kind of makes it nice and dark. So here I am just adding that into it, and I think it looks really nice. Kind of adds to that cave section. I'm just adding ambient occlusion and fog and things like that, and I do add some bloom as well. And here we go. So this is the cave so far with this. This is with the lighting. Kind of glows, kind of looks nice. It's what I'm going for. Maybe the light is probably too extreme, but that's okay. Here I'm just adding little bits and pieces to try and smooth out some of the paths. And this is without the lighting, so I'll turn the lighting off whenever I'm kind of editing the level, adding to it for the most part. Then I add in this spotlight, and this is going to shine onto certain sections that are open to the world. This will allow the cave to be lit up in certain sections and kind of add a bit of variation to the lighting, rather than it just being pure red all the time or just black. And I can kind of play around with this and have different kind of coloured lighting as well. So here I am just adding it in. Different parts of the caves will have this, just random light beaming from the outside. But the player won't be able to escape, it won't be able to get out of there. So here I'm just changing the fall off of the lighting and kind of the distance and intensity. Once that was introduced, I add more sections to the cave and play around with making sure that it's all connected, and then test it out again. Again, that little section there needs to be covered up or a way to get over that, which I do, and add more of these spike mounts to try and kind of add to it, and kind of make it so that player can jump to certain sections, cover certain sections that don't want to be seen, and then continue adding more sections. It's kind of the same thing over and over again, which is why I want to do maybe a time lapse next time, because it's not really much things to explain. There won't be much to explain. It's going to be very much the same things, but it's all about placement. It's all about placement. It's all about hiding things that you don't want to be seen, and making sure the player can't really go anywhere that you don't want them to, like you don't intend them to, but still make everything look natural and dynamic. And I think I do manage to do that with this cave system. It's a little bit too spiky, if I'm honest, but I prefer this than what my initial plan was, where it's a smooth cave system, because you get a lot of smooth cave systems in the games, especially if they're using voxel terrain. You'll get a lot of smooth cave systems, which I don't really like. I don't think they look very nice. So I think this sharp edge suits a low poly game. So this is what I mentioned this before, but I create a separate section after bringing all these in. I then create a new game object, which is going to be section 1. And what I'm going to do is, a lot of developers do this, although they do it a lot more stylish than I do, and a lot more less noticeable. But usually what they'll do, I'm just fixing a little bit of pieces here. Usually what they'll do is they'll actually mirror or simply copy and paste a certain section of a cave to kind of add to it. So you'll usually get sections that are made as prefabs, and they'll just combine them together and maybe add some randomness to them. And here I am, another spotlight, adding that into here, trying to kind of finish off certain sections, adding in these pillars, which will go into different parts of the cave. Again, make it so that it's a little bit more interesting, dynamic. And here's the open part of this of the cave so far. And just as I mentioned, just going to copy and paste the whole section and then mirror it by changing the opposite direction. Once I've added this pillar in, of course. So yeah, I'll just basically copy all of that, put it into the section 1, basically duplicate it and that whole section, and then move it over, and then try and combine them. Like I said, a lot of developers do this because of time. This took hours to do, this cave system, and there was a lot of changes and things that I cut out, but for the most part it's not too bad. Then this is the end section. This is the end part that's going to be the going to lead to the portal to the next level. So it's just on this little platform here, and you're just going to be able to jump up to that. So I'm adding little platforms here for you to be able to jump on, but I think you don't need this little platform to get up. And you'll be able to just jump up there and yeah, go into the portal once everything's sorted and once every tree has been grown. So it's still trees even though it's in a cave. I was planning on having it as a mushroom model instead though. Instead of a tree, it was going to be a mushroom to kind of fit the cave atmosphere. And then I added some pillars there to just hide some sections I don't want the player to see. Okay, so that is for the most part the cave design for the first level. This first level is only like essentially a tutorial to kind of explain the new mechanics. Again, instead of a spirit tree, it's going to be a mushroom. It's kind of going to explain how these lighting's going to work. It's going to explain, because we're going to have more lighting aspects in these caves, like we're going to have crystals that glow, mushrooms that glow, and there's going to be a different type of enemy in here that you got to look out for. But for the most part, so that's that section done. What you're seeing right now is just the a playthrough of it to show you what it looks like, and as you can see, it looks pretty good. So while I'm letting this play, I'm just going to do this outro. So this has been ProTailDev. Next time what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking into like a time lapse with me not talking. It's just going to be editing a whole level. So for the most part, it's not going to be much to it. But after that, when I come back, I'll probably be doing a little bit more maybe some new enemies, some more lighting aspects to it, some cave effects. We'll see. So this has been ProTelDev, and I'll see you next time.